you for joining Wars of the Roses. And this is Pyramid and Prophecy by Manly Palmer Hall. An article taken from Horizon, the magazine of useful and intelligent living, Volume 2, Number 11, July 1943. Pyramid and Prophecy by Manly Palmer Hall. The pyramid and the Bible are works greatly maligned by interpreters of both. What bothers practically every student of the Great Pyramid problems is whether or not the pyramid was built as a prophetic monument. The answer involves a number of other subjects, for there is no actual or absolute proof that the pyramid was built for any known purpose. All supposed purposes are but interpretations based upon varying degrees of evidence. All records of proof are so obliterated by time or destroyed by vandalism, nothing is left which would prove anything in a court of law. The Great Pyramid now stands as the unsolved riddle of the ages, guarded by the inscrutable Sphinx and constantly endangered by the shifting sands of the desert. According to Egyptologists of a conservative school, the Great Pyramid was built by the Arabs between 3,000 and 4,000 years before the Christian era. Copts and other sects of the desert say it was built, according to their traditions, about 70,000 years BC. So you see, there is but a trifling difference of 66,000 years in controversy. 2. The Egyptologists remind us the Arabs are romanticists of the highest order, and they advance the Arabian Nights to prove the truth is not in them. Science cannot disprove the historical accuracy of the Arabs, but it points to the Arabs as coming from a family of prevaricators, so it is to be assumed that everything they say is a lie at the beginning. This again will not hold in a court of law, but Egyptologists are not lawyers, and there is in consequence a lot of opinionism and battling of notions in most of so-called pyramid findings. The date at which the pyramid was originally built is interesting to some and perhaps significant to others, but is not a matter generally vital. No more so than to know the day when Abraham Lincoln was born. What he did as a man is the important thing. The real interest, therefore, is in the reason for the pyramid's existence. And strange and marvelous are the given reasons. Reasons have been piling up since the beginning of the 9th century. According to the oldest of the Arabic traditions, pyramids were treasure houses built by Cyclopean giants who lived upon the earth before the deluge. These giants, the Adamites, or the pre-Adamite men, are supposed to have been colossal creatures. It was said that during a time of warfare, the Great Pyramid was built in a single night to hide the treasures of the antediluvian king, Sheddad ben Ad. That is the oldest of the Arabic traditions. Another is, it was the original ark, erected to preserve certain persons against a universal deluge. And the claim is, there is evidence of water having reached 300 feet up the side of the pyramid. This would indicate that around it the entire land was submerged in water, but no such deluge has been recorded in history. The idea it was built as an ark for the deluge is also accepted as worthy of discussion, but not accepted unreservedly by the great Egyptologist Piazza Smyth. These two stories summarize the Arabic traditions. The Arabs insist that in ancient times the casing stones were covered with hieroglyphics, one of which bore the inscription, "I have built, erected and finished, and that which I have built will remain to the end of time, for it was difficult to build and impossible to destroy." Of course, that does not tell anything. If it is interesting, so is the idea sponsored by Herodotus, who said that the outside of the building was originally covered with hieroglyphics to immortalize the number of onions consumed by the various stonemasons who worked upon it. Greek and Roman traditions, for the most part, agree that the pyramid was built as a royal tomb intended for the pharaoh Cheops. But he was not buried in it, being of bad character and unworthy of so great an honor. Another of their traditions was that the Great Pyramid was a temple sacred to the god Osiris, as the flame. Pyramid means flame, the flame mountain or the hill of fire, and in the original state the sides were perfectly smooth, covered with a white stone, and the sun striking on it turned the whole edifice into a triangle of light. Another tradition Greeks and Romans agreed upon was that the Great Pyramid was visited in early times by the Christian philosophers who were initiated in its crypts and tombs. Egyptian opinions in regard to the pyramid are also worthy of consideration. If, according to one group, it was the tomb of Cheops, according to another, the tomb of Osiris, the great black god of the Nile, Then to a third group, it was the tomb of Thoth Hermes Trismegistus, or Hermes, the god of learning. And to a fourth group, it was the peculiar dwelling place of the mysteries, or the rites of ancient Memphis, the mysterious repository of eternal wisdom of the ancient Egyptians. Modern suppositions go into the reason why for the pyramid from another angle. According to one group, it is an astronomical building containing within it the secrets of the celestial measurements between the Earth and the parts of the solar system. The Smythe group believes it was a granary built in Egypt by Josephus to keep the stores of Egypt. But as the rooms are inefficiently out of proportion to the size of the building and could not contain sufficient grain even to take care of a small community for 1 year, this is not an impressive supposition. Others believe the pyramid was set up as a great system of time measurement and that it is really a sundial, casting shadows at certain angles indicating certain things. The trouble with that theory is, the shadows do not fall where they ought to. Among other suppositions, one is that the pyramid was built by the so-called children of Israel while in bondage to Egypt, to conceal within the whole story of the Mosaic Law, and it is a building of revelation. The trouble with this is the structure was built far too early to be applicable to biblical religion. It is sensible to recognize that the Great Pyramid of Giza, while the greatest pyramid in Egypt, is not a unique structure. There are several hundred pyramids in Egypt, some now only broken ruins, while others are still comparatively perfect, and all are built approximately on the same general plan. The Great Pyramid is regarded as the most perfect example of pyramid building, but it is not the largest pyramid in the world. The Pyramid of Xochicalco in Mexico is 300 feet longer at the base. In every way, it is larger than the Pyramid of Cheops, but because of its ruined condition, we can gain no estimate of its original height. Pyramids were built in all parts of the world. There are others in Central America and a few in South America. The Pyramid of Giza, according to the popular belief, is different from every other building in the world, but by actual comparison, it exceeds the second pyramid only slightly in height and in size. And the second one is almost equally as fine a piece of workmanship. The third pyramid is considerably smaller than these two. The Great Pyramid was first opened in the early years of the 9th century, and the question arises, what was actually found? If we agree with the Arabs for the moment, and there is no reason why they should be wrong about everything, for after all, they built a great cultural civilization, the Arabs insist that when the pyramid was opened, what they found within was a golden man. That is, some kind of a box described as in the shape of a man, gilded on the outside, covered with writing and inlaid with jewels. This golden man was taken into Arabia and has since been lost. They, of course, meant a mummy case. But the great coffer in the king's chamber is too short to house a body without the body being bent. The opening of the lower subterranean chamber of the Great Pyramid came later. On the walls were found Greek and Latin inscriptions, which means that the room had been opened at some time during the classical period. By the type of writing, this is supposed to have been done between the 1st and 3rd centuries. And furthermore, the opening was not one made to the outer surface, but through some subterranean passage not since discovered. When Davidson, the first man to make a consistent exploration of the pyramid, opened the room of construction, he found hieroglyphics painted on the walls. To open the room, he had to force his way through the enveloping rock, justifying the supposition that the writing was put there at the time of the construction. Markings apparently of Egyptian hieroglyphics were found laid on in red pigments on the low ceilings of the construction rooms. You have to kneel down to see them, and they are now in a greatly mutilated condition and cannot be read. It is believed they form the cartouche of the pharaoh Cheops, with indications of what may have been the Cheops seal. The question is, was the inscription put there at the time the pyramid was built, or was the inscription put on afterward? This inscription remains the one stumbling block to the acceptance of the great antiquity of the pyramid. A peculiar tool-like object resembling the head of a hatchet was found when the pyramid was opened, in form a lunar crescent with a handle coming out of the lunar arch. And there was a small sphere about the size of a child's ball. This is believed to have been a tool used for leveling. When a stone block was put in place, the ball was placed in the center, and if the ball rolled off, the block was not level. There has been much speculation as to how the pyramid was built. The belief that it was raised by levitation has been regarded as quite improbable, a needless putting on of a metaphysical appearance to something that could have been accomplished mechanically. It could have been built with unlimited labor and wealth. Today it could not be duplicated because of the labor problem. If labor could be secured in this country for a long enough time to accomplish such a piece of work, the expense would be prohibitive. The limestone blocks, sawed with copper saws, the teeth of which were precious stones, were afterwards trued and fitted together in rows or levels. A whole floor or level was laid at the same time. The size of the stones decreased progressively from the bottom to the top, many of the stones weighing tons. The base of the pyramid, the ground area which had to be first covered, is about 11 acres. As to the use of mechanism, Herodotus mentions a simple machine for lifting stone, based on the counterbalance principle. Also, for the building of the rooms, long runways were made, remnants of which still remain. Sometimes a runway had to be more than a mile in length. These were slanted up, and as the rows of stone blocks were built up, a mountain was built around them, in a long, gentle incline. The mountain was increased as each layer of blocks was built up. When it was finished, there was nothing visible but the stone on top, and the mountain was then torn down. According to the Greeks, the length of time required for the construction was between 6 and 10 years, and one record states 65,000 people were employed. They came with their families and set up a complete city. While the most common thought considers the Great Pyramid as a royal tomb, an extravagance of Cheops, another and equally significant idea is to be seen as having bearing upon the situation. A peculiar principle in action among the Egyptians was belief in the immortality of the soul. They believed in reincarnation, believed in transubstantiation. Thus the pharaohs, when they died, retained their identity as long as their bodies remained. And so the Egyptian priests or initiates were mummified. They could stay then in the spirit world, but as earthbound souls they formed a council of the dead and continued to fight for Egypt in heaven even as they fought for it upon the earth. So the longer the final disintegration of the body was put off, the longer the priest or initiate continued to serve Egypt, and everything possible was done to preserve the continuity of the intellect of the departed. Very astute Orientalists and Egyptologists hold to the opinion that herein lies the pyramid mystery, an indestructible house for the preservation of the soul. How the great lived was not important, how they died was not important, but that the soul lived was all important. The body of everyone who died in Egypt was not preserved in this manner, for all were not regarded as worthy to be bound to the earth. In many burial grounds in Egypt are figures seated usually with the knees drawn up against the chest, a position symbolical of rebirth, the position of the embryo with the hole in the earth, the womb. To be buried in the womb was to signify that the departed would be reborn. In the case of a priest or a great warrior, his continuity was believed essential to the dynasty. His power was needed for the protection of Egypt, and these bodies were protected. And so it was that even after an elapse of 10,000 years, Cheops served Egypt as a mysterious metaphysical force. This is the story the Coptics told, and they were among the early Christians of Egypt. To understand the magnificence of the royal tombs, the Egyptians believed, like most ancient people, that the abode of the dead was in the underworld. Modern Egyptologists are inclined to ignore this thought, and yet it is the likely excuse for building a mountain over a room no larger than average size. In Egypt, the religious ritual followed the rites of the dead. In all religions, they nearly always do. In Christianity, the mystical traditions follow the death and resurrection of Christ. And we have the saying about the seed which falls in the earth, unless it dies, it cannot be born again. In Egypt, the death rites and the initiation rites of the ancient mysteries were identical. The Egyptian initiations were given in the tomb or the sacerdotal crypt. Thus, the soul of the dead priest partook in the ritual. If this may seem to be a very unusual type of religious belief, it is one we have to work with. After all, it was the Egyptians and not ourselves who built the pyramid. Another angle to consider is the Egyptians themselves having left no discoverable record to give any indication of the meaning of the pyramid. There are suggestions in the Book of the Dead that the pyramid was very old even in the ancient Egyptian civilization. And so it is quite possible the pyramid went through several processes of rebuilding, reconstruction, and rededication. We know the pharaohs mutilated the monuments of their predecessors and put their names on them, which makes it quite possible that the Great Pyramid is older than the man who is supposed to have built it. Equally possible it is that the whole structure was renovated at some remote time, which may account for the Egyptian hieroglyphics in the pyramid. For with this one exception, it is entirely bare of inscriptions and other markings. It is also quite possible that it was the first federal project recorded in history. In a great period of famine and drought among the Egyptians, the king or pharaoh might have set the populace to work upon pyramid buildings, not because they were necessary, but because they would keep the people employed over a long period of time. Records among the ancient classical writings point to that assumption. In the writings of Diodorus Siculus, it is stated the pyramid was an unemployment project. Among a certain number of illusions are those to be attributed to the many people who believe the Christian religion is the one and only true faith. The pyramid being of noble proportions, it is their opinion that it must have been built to bear witness to the Judaic and Messianic mysteries. This is the viewpoint that is the basis of most of the pyramid prophecies. To me, there is no evidence whatsoever that the Egyptians were interested in the second coming of Christ. Their own religion had an entirely different concept, a concept we should have had, which we did not get, for they were far ahead of us. In the book of the Battle of Horus, it is stated, "The millennium is the ever-coming one." In other words, the Egyptians did not believe in a millennium as the average person conceives it. They believed everyone, any person who in himself was lifted up to truth, accomplished a millennium mystery in his own life and nature. At any time, anyone could have truth born in him again, and that circumstance was the second coming. The astonishing idea that the clouds would someday open and let the New Jerusalem come down from heaven on a windlass did not enter into their ideas. Furthermore, the Egyptian religion stood for 5,000 years with only one major reform in it, the adding of a mystical element to an occult. From the beginning of recorded history, from at least 6,000 BC, the Egyptian religion was an organized belief, and down to the time of the last Ptolemy, never at any time did the Egyptians borrow any major doctrine or belief from some other people. When you study some of the things Christians have believed, you know how infinite can be their capacity for credulity. What looks to be the truth of the matter is, the pyramid measurements are part of a great architectural science. In any organized mathematical formula, certain cosmic influences are at work. For after all, an architect is merely man building according to the laws of nature, in knowledge of the laws of nature. It is furthermore evident that the builders of the pyramid understood heliocentric astronomy. And if they understood heliocentric astronomy 4,000 years before the Christian era and had any contact with the Judaistic theology, why did the Judaists cling entirely to the geocentric astronomy? The astronomers who built the pyramid knew the solar system, but the men who built the Old and New Testaments did not. This too is a difference of viewpoint which cannot be reasonably passed over. So it is very improbable that there is any direct connection between the pyramid builders and any phase of Christianity. Why then has there been so much excitement among certain groups of people over the pyramid and the possibility of its being a prophetic monument, foretelling the second coming, the next world war, peace, power, and plenty, and other assorted things? It depends upon what you believe in. When the Romans built a city, they usually killed a heifer on the ground where the city was to be built, took out its intestines, and prophesied by them. Think of what you can do with a pyramid, when you can prophesy 5,000 years ahead on a cow's intestines. You do not need much to start with. Curiously enough, there was practicality behind the cow's intestines. They had, for a certain length of time, let the cow graze on the ground, which was to be the site of the city. And by examining the intestines, it could be determined whether or not there were any injurious elements in the soil or water, which would result disastrously to the city, which changes the action from something ridiculous to one having within it an extraordinary amount of common sense. The pyramid has been divided off into measurements, into cubits, by the prophecy advocates. And within these measurements they have been looking for dents and scratches on the pyramid passages. When someone finds a small scratch, he announces, "That is the world war." It works out fine, if you believe it, as something in the original plan of the pyramids. The only way these prophecies can be proved is by their working out correctly. I've investigated a number of them. The Millennium Prophecy recorded within the pyramid is fairly recent, yet I have discovered that the Millennium Prophecy has been circulated since the 12th century. All Millennium Prophecies have failed to date. Probably you can remember a few of the end of the world scares you had when you were children. For a long time, the world has been going to end in a short time. Cold fact brings us up against this. All the prophecies contained in the Bible are allegorical, symbolizing certain hidden things unknown to the average person. If the allegorical parts of the Bible are taken historically, you're in trouble, for prophecies dealing with the human soul are not to be misinterpreted into social predictions. And there is the other matter also, that Bible translations are not correct to start with. The most reasonable attitude to hold toward the pyramid is that it is a magnificent example of geometry, and into it is incorporated all the existing forms of existing knowledge in antiquity, as a miniature of the universe. Like Solomon's temple, it is a duplicate of the world, to show in story that the universe is the temple of the ever-living God. From any exact pattern you can create a system of prophecy. You can do it with the Colosseum or the Pantheon, or any other ancient building, for all of them are astronomically equilibrated in all their parts, and all were built for the purpose of revealing universal law. But there is no evidence to presume this universal mystery was bearing witness to our modern theology, for today we do not even know the laws by which a structure such as the pyramid was built. We are very much more shallow than they were. Their theology would be beyond our comprehension. Ours to them would be a silly belief. It is very unlikely they had any intention of foretelling the second coming of Christ or a world war, since they were building a lasting monument to universal law. We are not able to understand that monument for the reason we are superstitious about it, as we are superstitious about our Bible. Both the pyramid and the Bible are greatly maligned works. Their purpose has been brought to nothing by the misunderstanding of those who have sought to interpret both. Two things are certain. Great changes are coming into the world, and the end toward which man is struggling has no dateline to it. We are not going to wake suddenly in a changed world. The change that is to come about, we must bring about in reforms we must accomplish. Perhaps it will be thousands and millions of years before men will live together in peace on this earth. Yet man would lead us to believe that some great change is just around the corner. There's been such human belief from the beginning. Like the Egyptians 5,000 years ago, growing and struggling toward a far beyond, we have not the intellect to guess what tomorrow is going to be. Predictions and prophecies are of little use if we are to become universal thinkers, and the Great Pyramid is best seen as a magnificent architectural achievement, something to confound us in its present splendor. As we do not bow down before this mystery, but strive to perfect ourselves, we will gain the form of intellect which will enable us to understand it. Thank you for watching, and please don't forget to share, like, subscribe, and comment. And if you can, please consider donating to Wars of the Roses. Links to PayPal and Patreon are in the description. Thank you so very much.